Good morning, everyone, and thanks for joining us for today's webinar. I'm Edessa Paulzine. I'm the Sales and Marketing Manager at WebCourseWorks, and we will be getting started in just about a minute here. But first, I would like to direct your attention to the questions pane. If you have any questions during the webinar or you're going through audio issues, anything you would like to let us know, click the Q&A button at the bottom and send your questions through that. Let's see, some people are coming in. We have Elizabeth from New Jersey. Welcome. All right, it's 11 o'clock, so let's get started. I'd like to introduce one of our speakers for today's webinar, Dr. John Alexon, CEO and founder of WebCourseWorks. John Alexon is an educational leader and consultant in association learning technologies and e-learning. He works with an extensive list of association clients on LMS implementation and development, platform alignment and integration, and online curriculum development, giving him a holistic view of business models, operational practices, and educational approaches in association e-learning. John, are you on?
Yes, I am. Thank you very much. Welcome, everybody. It's a beautiful day here in Daytona Beach, Florida, and we're interested in hearing from where you're from and what you do. So, Dawn, welcome from Chicago. And Barbara, welcome from Minnesota. I just like to put a quick plug in before I introduce my co-presenter. Quick plug in for a book I've got coming out in August. It's called The Expert's Halo. I've been studying how association staff can work with their member experts to build better content. So you'll hear from me about some ideas I have on getting more out of your experts and really pushing the envelope in terms of the virtual content that's produced. So Kiki, are you with us?
I am. If I can hit unmute, I am with you. Yes.
Great. You want to just tell us who you work for and just a little bit about your overall experience?
Sure. I am a consultant with Techer International, and it is a consulting firm that focuses on strategic planning. Many people know me for the years that I've put in as the host and community manager for Association Chat, which has been around for 11 years. Association Chat reaches 72,000, something around 72,000 individuals monthly with the podcast and online community. But I started out working in associations and working for several associations before I jumped over to the dark side and went into consulting. And so I have a great passion and love for associations, and that's why I've spent my entire career here.
Great. Hi, Cheryl from Cleveland, Ohio. Linda from Connecticut. It's great to have you all here, and it's good to see more and more names coming. Let me just talk a little bit about our agenda for today. We're going to, just kind of toss around how we define a virtual event, and we really hope that you can contribute to. We're going to talk a little bit about game planning the event, just briefly, because what we really want to get to is the topic today, which is preparing your experts. And I know Kiki has a lot to share about the technical execution. She might even show us her lighting setup that she has in her studio at home. We're going to then move on to talk about how to be super creative about the content that we produce for our events. And I've been studying this a long time in terms of how do we get more from our experts. And I know some of you are with associations with smaller staffs, but I'm going to sort of run the gamut between those that have larger staffs and those that really have to be creative about getting their subject matter experts to contribute. So let's move forward then. Okay, I do have to give a shout out to Jeff Cobb. For those of you in the association learning space, you know Jeff and you know his company, Tagoras. Andessa is going to send you a link to this research report. And what's really interesting about it is Jeff's been an analyst in this area of virtual meetings, virtual events before it became so popular. Several years of experience. And I think, one of the things that the report says, and you might want to use this as you convince your board that virtual is the way to go, even after this current COVID-19 situation, pandemic. Once we get away from this, I'm hoping that more and more people look at some of the advantages of doing virtual events. I know Jeff Cobb does, and he said that 92% of the people he's surveyed, 92% of the associations have said they would do it again. One of the things that I also heard from Jeff, and it may not be in the report, but association meeting people that have done these virtual events are saying they're much more profitable. And this is after several years of doing it. Kiki, do you have any comment about that in terms of doing this?
Yeah, I think it's one of the biggest concerns I've been hearing from association executives has been this concern about profit margin, and the fact that a lot of association executives who've they've never considered having the virtual event, or they have only done so where it's been a small piece of the larger in-person event that they've held. There's been a big concern about profit margin, and with good reason. I think that when an in-person event is set up, it's geared to maximize the profit around those people who are there in the flesh. They're meeting face to face. The trade show floor is set up, and it's set up around those meetings. And maybe they haven't considered the virtual elements and the ways that you can build with that virtual event in mind first. For those association executives who've gone through building an event with the virtual in mind from the beginning as being a larger component, there are so many different ways that you can layer and build and create a much bigger profit. But you have to start with that in mind. It's one of those things where it's harder to retroactively go back and refit an in-person event so that it's going to have the same kind of profit that a virtual one does. But if you start with that in mind, with the virtual in mind, then you can do more with that.
Right. And I think one of the things to consider is that as we invest more in planning pre-produced materials for our virtual event, we're going to spend, and there's going to be budgets allocated. And those of us that have experience with video, and I know you do, Kiki, know that video can get more expensive, or very expensive, and you will start to see more creative development of content, which will drive the cost of a virtual event up. But it's still going to be more profitable based on those that have been putting them on for several years.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of expense around your destination. I mean, many of us are figuring this out, right? As we are facing contracts we can't get out of, and we're dealing with the result of having to switch last minute from having these in-person events. There's a lot of cost involved. So yeah, there's definitely a cost you can cut out. And of course, you're going to have more expense on the production side. However, I will say this, with a little bit of effort and working with your content creators, your content experts on the front end of it, there's so many solutions out there, so many creative ways that you can do things with your content that you can actually drive up the quality without having to pay an arm and a leg to do it. But it does require some planning.
Okay, so let's just kind of level set here as to what we mean by a virtual event. And I mean, I think that definitely you could consider obviously the webinar like we're doing today, and we're experimenting with Zoom. We typically have used GoToWebinar, and now we're using Zoom because we thought, well, we're all, putting our image up on the screen, so why not do it for a webinar? But it goes from webinar all the way, to a virtual conference, which everybody's concerned about, as we know. But then it also goes to workshops, your educational workshops, your smaller conferences, and then your online materials, which might be informal types of gatherings or a formal class that is both synchronous, which means it's live like we are today, or also on demand components or asynchronous. So we really want you to think in that full gamut when you look at virtual events. So this next slide we have is, we're talking about what are we going to do to game plan? What are we going to do to get ready? And I think there's a lot of questions that you need to answer in terms of when you're going to have it. Are you going to charge or not charge? I know a lot of associations are looking at their events now and saying, well, we can't charge as much because it's not the same. But I think there's going to be a sweet spot. What do you think, Kiki, as far as how much it costs to come to a virtual event?
I think for sure. Okay, like when we first saw organizations that were figuring out how to put a virtual event on instead of the in-person, immediately people are just like, hey, we want to reach as many people as possible. We're going to make this as easy as we can. And so there were large conferences that were going out that were either at a reduced rate, dramatically reduced rate, even free for conferences that usually charge upwards of over $1,000, right? But it can't stay that way. And I think that this was more of getting accustomed to virtual offerings for people who had never really considered those before. There has quietly been for a long time a growing number of people who have been asking for more virtual offerings from conferences, from in-person events. And so you're going to be hearing a lot of thank yous from people who are, maybe their mobility is challenged. The people who have been arguing for accessibility for years are thrilled now that there are more and more educational offerings that are available right now online. And so it's interesting that, we have come to this point where, now everybody's starting to ask, well, how should I price things? And I see in the comments, somebody said, we price according to CPE credits earned like our other live face-to-face sessions. And that's definitely something that I think that's a great way to start thinking about it. Also, according to access to workshops and additional types of content, there may be specialized types of training, one-on-one types of coaching, and different types of things that you can offer through your virtual events that can, add another layer to your pricing. But as far as the basic price for access to a virtual conference or virtual event, right now I think people are beginning to figure out, organizations that I'm talking to are trying to figure out, how can we move this into a direction where it's getting away from the free or freemium model that we've been seeing lately, because people weren't used to having to go to this virtual option, because for some people they've never really ventured into that territory. And so it was a little bit of a getting to know you moment there.
I'm really curious of those that are attending. Could you, in the chat box, talk a little bit about, how are you promoting a virtual event, if you're considering one, and then B, how are you evaluating the virtual event? Those are two key things that you want to have in your game plan. So feel free to add to it, make comments on that as we move on here to the next slide. I should do one of those classroom pauses, right?
It's good. It's good. Yes.
Yeah.
We have a request to repeat the question. So what are you asking for people to type into the chat box?
Right. Two things. One is, how are you promoting your virtual events? Is there any special way you're promoting it? And then how are you evaluating the success of the virtual event?
Mm-hmm. We have someone who's saying virtual attendees versus face-to-face and new attendees. which are great metrics. Those are great ways to measure, who are we seeing that we haven't seen before? I have a story. Can I butt in here, John? Will you let me tell a little story? Okay.
Absolutely.
Very short. So I have a very good friend, Kevin, who's been in the industry for ages, and one of the organizations that he belongs to, he's a member of. He's gone to their meetings, their annual, for 6 years in a row. He said this year he engaged more and got to know more people through their virtual meeting than ever before. And he said, it's so weird. For 6 years, I've been traveling. I've been spending money going to this in-person event. And I've made more contacts in my LinkedIn from going to this virtual event than ever before. And so it's really interesting to me that, as far as his perception, his engagement is so much higher and his perceived value is so much higher. So, I'm not just saying that to argue on, virtual is better than in person, but it is an interesting case where there's somebody who has been going year after year and they're saying, wow, this really was effective for me.
That's great. Thank you, Kiki.
Mm-hmm.
You can tell as many stories as you'd like. They're good. They're good ones.
If they're
So here's Aaron. Aaron's talking about, we have been adding Google surveys to our events and had been asking people to copy the link and fill it out. We don't always get everybody to do this, so we have to ask a few times, right? You got to tell people 3 times, right? 3 different ways. Any advertising techniques that you've seen, Kiki, that really work?
Well, I will say that, as busy as we are, even if we're sheltering in place, and some of us aren't anymore, but even if we are, it takes 12 touch points. Did you know that 12 touch points in order to break through on average, to get your message across? So it's not to say keep doing the same thing over and over again, but it is to say you have to think of multiple channels and multiple ways to get the message out so that you can actually reach people.
I like this comment here about Kirkpatrick's 4 levels. Must be a learning person. Excellent. And what's kind of neat about these virtual events now and becoming more popular is people are actually more interested, and I think it's the boards, it's the governance of associations saying, what are we doing online? And that includes more formal online learning. When I think of Kirkpatrick, I think of more formal because the second level, of course, is you do some kind of pre-test and then post-test to measure, did learning take place? I think that's always really effective if you can do it. And that says a more formal event. And the first level, of course, is the smiley sheet. And what's neat about these platforms today is you can have a much more sophisticated smiley sheet than we have ever had before. So we're getting much more data because we have the data of the attendance, the member, non-member data, as everybody's been talking about, which is great. So there's a lot of neat things that we can do now with the electronic platforms that give us more information and more data.
It's so true.
Yeah, lots of good comments here.
Yeah, and that actually reminds me, I saw where someone was reaching out to us. We're seeing a ton, as panelists, we're seeing a ton of comments coming in, but I'm sure you're not seeing all of the comments that we're seeing, and you might want to make sure that you are in the chat box. Go to all panelists on Send Chat to, or not all panelists and attendees. And that way, it won't just be John and me and our good friend behind the scenes, Odessa, seeing it. It'll also be all of you. But they're fantastic comments.
Good comment there. It's on the very bottom of your screen. You'll see that we've got 59 participants, and there's the chat box next to the Q&A. We're all using the chat box for those that are wondering. So why don't we move on to how do we prepare our experts, and which is very, very important. So Kiki, do you use a generic kind of preparing your experts or preparing your person that's going to do a webinar? Do you have a cheat sheet, a checklist that you send them?
I do, actually. I have a checklist that I use, and I can say that because I know that I'm going to be doing the same type of events, which for me is podcast recordings or webinars. I have a template that I just fill in the information, and it will be the links that they need to use that are specific and unique to them, the date and time. I'll have the date and time bolded several places. I also will specify, I imagine you can imagine why I need to do that.
Right.
I
We
will
love
also,
we love our member experts. We really do.
oh yes, and I will also specify how they can do pre-check on their AV to test their tech ahead of time themselves. And I will also have a little bit of information that they can know that gives background about what they're participating in. And so that when they share information about it, they understand what they're talking about and can share it pretty easily. I'll also say that there is a list of links that I also have at the end that will allow them to share, whether it's like the podcast, the website, their particular episode, any information they might want, where they can find those links, including the social media links, because that will allow them to share and promote their own session better.
That's excellent. So how do you get your member experts to practice? Practice, right?
Yes, yes. It's really, I'll say some people want it. Most people don't, because they think they're too busy and they've done all of these a million times before. You know, I would imagine right now it would be extra hard. I'm on Zoom all day. I don't need, I know I'm on it all the time. There's no problem. I can do this. But it's really good to jump on early, always jump on a little bit early to make sure everybody can get on, that they don't have last minute issues. I can't tell you the number of times, you know, if you can imagine over 11 years of pretty much doing, it averages out to one a week, an interview a week. I have had about every kind of technical difficulty, issue, last minute problem. I've been live and the person drops off and doesn't come back. I mean, I have had it all happen.
Right.
I even was going live and had a fire break out in the building I was in. We had to leave, and then the discussion continued on the sidewalk outside, going live using a live stream. So I'm telling you, I've seen it all. Practice makes perfect in so many ways. And when you're
Right.
thinking about the things that can go wrong, I mean, a number of things can go wrong, whether it's your microphone decides to stop working. You know, I always would say opt for the wired earbuds if you're going to be doing something. A lot of people like the AirPods and stuff. But what happens when you're on, you know, an hour-long call and suddenly the battery's out and it no
Right.
longer works? You lose the connection. That's a nightmare.
Right. And
So,
Did you notice here? Did you notice that Jean wants you to share your checklist? Will
Jean,
you do that?
Jean, I would share my checklist. Afterwards, I'll be happy to share my template that I use for association chat, and you
Great.
can definitely just adjust it and tweak it to fit
Great.
whatever your needs are.
One of the things that I like to do is to come up with creative ways to get the speaker or the expert to meet. And, you know, maybe we don't call it a practice session.
Mhm.
Maybe it's a review of your content. Maybe you offer to help increase the quality of their presentation. I know that can be delicate, but you know, it's another way to get close to your expert. There are different ways, I think, of kind of sneaking out a quasi practice session. Meeting ahead of time is always a good idea in terms of, well, let's meet an hour ahead and let's do a quick run through, that kind of thing. And it may be a stiff run through, but that rehearsal is thanks, Elizabeth. Um, I was thinking of that word, her rehearsal. Um, anyway, yeah, to do that, I think that's a good term, and to do that ahead of time is always really good. Any other ideas here, Kiki, before we move on to your expertise in technical aspects?
Well, okay. I guess if we're just thinking about the preparing and getting
Right.
ready, I would say that you know, a lot of times when we're working with subject matter experts, we know that they might show up to the in-person event, and we have a little time to adjust them. Maybe their tie is off kilter or something. The appearance issues, there can be issues that happen ahead of time too. Maybe they're a little unkempt. Maybe they keep their dirty laundry in the back, like literally in the back of the room, in which this is why it's good to have a rehearsal. So I would say that, it is really important to meet ahead of time in the space that they're going to be recording in, so that you have an idea, so that you know kind of what the surroundings are going to be like. This is like a crossover, a bridge
Right.
area into the
Right.
tech, but.
Yes, I'm adjusting my tie. So Odessa, if you want to switch to the next slide, but you said there's a question from Cheryl.
Oh.
I am having trouble seeing
I
it.
see it. I
Oh, you
see
do?
it. Yes.
Okay.
So Cheryl says our subject matter experts are typically peers in a trade industry, so not necessarily skilled in speaking. Is there a better format to present them in, live versus pre-recorded, etc.? So I have my opinion. John, what do you
Go
think?
for it. You go for yours first, and then I'll give you my opinion after yours.
Okay. So I would say that if they are the experts and they are brilliant and wonderful, but they're not very skilled at speaking, of course, it would be great to pre-record them. A lot of times, just the fact that they're going to be live makes people nervous and they stumble. I've heard people who have vocal tics that come out, that they stumble and stumble when they're live. But when I was talking to them beforehand, before there was an audience, it was fine. So I would suggest that you do try to do some kind of pre-recorded thing. And if you can do some light editing, even better. A
Right.
lot of times if people just feel like the fear of sounding like a fool or something like that, people get all worried about what other people are thinking about them. And
Right.
if you can alleviate some of that fear, then their brilliance can come out, and you won't have as many stumbling blocks as you might if you were trying to go live and they're worried about the tech and they're worried about the people and they're worried about how they sound and look
Right.
and all of that stuff.
This is a great segue into one of my favorite tips, which is hire professionals. I mean, there are a lot of association staffs that, do, like in the medical space, for example, you have a medical writer on staff. Many of us work with professional video crews. Invest in making your member experts look great. So you are going to have to say to your board, I need more budget, or your supervisor, I need more budget because I want to make our member experts look great. And you do that by having a team of experts that help by having a team of professionals that know how to do this, whether it's speaking or one of the classic examples that we've been involved in is when we encounter a speaker that is so-so, or has maybe an issue with it, basically we'll record a session, we'll transcribe a session, and then we'll hire a professional voiceover. So in other words, we'll pre-can that presentation with a professional voiceover, which enhances the quality of that message. So really good question, great question about how do we make our experts look better, and how do we pinpoint the best way to utilize them. And I'm a big fan of transcribe them and repackage it with professionals. A lot of freelancers will do this for you as well. Have you had an experience with that, Kiki, where a team of professionals really polishes up a presentation?
I have. I've seen it, and I've seen it done in a number of different ways. Sometimes where they'll even just, they'll have like they'll have like an animated sort of explainer type of video that's created off of the content that's shared, and that kind of thing. And in fact, I'm working on a project with ASAE that's wrapping up right now. That we're in the editing phase, and we brought in some subject matter experts and who were talking about some advanced marketing practices for associations. And some of them had some stuff that needed to be cleaned up. And so with some professional editors and people who are able to come in and kind of design new types of ways to work around when there are things, the rough spots, so to speak, it makes it a lot better. But there's a lot you can do. It's really about, getting to the good stuff, getting to the good content. I love this comment over here, by the way. Elizabeth talked about our SMEs presenters are usually volunteers. We invite them to practice and get coaching. Also have a PDF with best practices. This practice and get coaching thing is amazing. I wish more people would do that, more organizations would do that, because what a gift, I can imagine that for professional development purposes, what a great benefit for those people who want to advance in their own careers to be able to look and sound their best and get coaching. I mean, that's beautiful. So kudos to you, Elizabeth.
Right. One of the things that we've done, if we, are allowed the budget, is, we'll do the method of, the rehearsal recording, transcribe, and then literally build a very, polished, articulate storyline piece, and then put a narrated voice to it. You can again always say, this is narrated by a professional, oftentimes once the piece is polished, that hesitant expert will actually agree to re-record and can record in segments and really get it down correctly.
Mm-hmm.
So there is a question from Sarah here. Kiki, why don't you look at it while I introduce the building rapport with eye contact, lighting, and audio.
Okay, let's see here. So Sarah says, can you put it behind? Oh, okay. So she's responding to an earlier question that had to do with, Dawn's question about our presenters or volunteers, and we're a medical group. And often our presenters are willing to do a live presentation, but get nervous about us recording it and sharing the recording due to the images in their slides. How are folks getting around this issue? And so so Sarah's responding, can you put it behind a member login for those who want to view later? At least that limits the distribution to your members and attendees. And yeah, so then there's the, would they be okay with a pre-recording that's a sort of simulated live, but then not shared afterward? It's a rebroadcast at a particular date and time, preferably with the speaker available for Q&A in the chat, or a live Q&A after the rebroadcast, but then that's it. No sharing for later viewing. And Sarah says, yes, that's what I was trying to do with a smiley face. Yes, sorry, behind member login. So yeah, I've definitely seen a lot of concern in the medical industry, especially when you go to those live conferences. They don't want you to record when you're in the room, use your phone. They don't want any of that. So naturally, there's going to be some sensitivity in figuring out, I don't know if I want this sucker recorded, because they've been trained to be very careful. And it's so important to share that information. I love this idea of having the simulated live, where maybe people are able to choose from a few different blocks, where the speakers are there to answer questions. The subject matter experts can answer questions in the chat, or maybe even come on to answer questions through video, but they're not actually doing the presentation again. They've already recorded it and they're sharing it for those specific times, and that's it, nothing else. That's a really great solution.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about how to help your subject matter experts look better or come off better. And besides for practicing, and I'm sure your checklist has everything to do with these technical aspects, but I've often encouraged association staff to literally send a kit to speakers. And by a kit, I mean a ring light,
mm-hmm.
An audio headset, I mean, I just have this cheap Logitech headset. I hope it sounds okay.
It works fine.
Okay, great. Yeah, I mean, you can, for less than $40 equip a speaker, and if the event is important enough, it may be worth it. Do you want to talk a little bit about eye contact and lighting?
Yeah, I think that someone asked earlier, do you think that people are being a little bit more lenient with tech issues and things like that because of the current situation? We all know that people are working from home and doing things from home when they wouldn't normally. So, unless their specialty is, AV, then they understand, things are unusual right now. And I think that, yeah, for the most part, there's a lot of leniency and grace that's being practiced, which we all need more of that. However, I do think that now that we've seen this, I was reading a report that the workplace is not going to be what it was before. A lot of people, and I know of organizations by name that have decided now they are going virtual for the most part, that they're not going to have a lot of people returning back to a physical location, or at least not in the numbers that they used to. And because that's the case, I do believe that most of us are going to have to begin to figure out, how do we best represent ourselves professionally on camera from home? We're going to have to figure out something better with our lighting situation, whether it's getting more surface light, table light, or ring lights and investing. We're going to have to start figuring that out. And so one of the things, that I think many of us saw very early on is that the location of the built-in camera can be a huge deal. Like if I'm looking up here into the camera, and this is my removable USB webcam, Logitech, really great stuff. If I'm looking into this, I can adjust it. I'm looking at you. I'm looking at you. But if I'm using my built-in webcam, then on this device, it would be a little bit underneath there. So I'd be looking underneath where I'd be looking at you. And some of us have them built into the side and in the base, like in the crack of your laptop. It's somewhere down here.
Yeah,
That's where you get this thing.
I have
where
to
you're
cut
looking
in.
up someone's
Yeah,
nose.
I have to cut in. That's my number one pet peeve, are those people that use their laptop, people that use their laptop cameras,
I know, but you feel for them because it's like, I get it. You'd never expected to be the person that was worrying if you were photo ready, camera ready, but, welcome to, COVID-19 life, right? We have to be thinking about, are we representing ourselves professionally? And somewhere along the way, you have to answer the question, do I look okay professionally on camera? And now you do. And if you haven't, addressed that question, one might wonder why not, So I think that we do have to start thinking about that. The kits to send out to people are really great. What I have a list with suggested links, like different types of things. There are different price points for people. If you know that you're going to invest in something a little bit more robust, that's going to, you do a lot of webinars, you are the subject matter expert, you probably should spend some time investing in a more substantial lighting kit. I have something set up here, and you made reference earlier, maybe you'll share your lighting setup.
Please share.
I have something set up here that is pretty simple, not super expensive, because I have a small office space, and so I don't have a lot of depth. And what that means is, when I use like a light box or something like that, it can be too bright. It can be too much, even with filters added. So I have dimmable ring lights spread out. I can choose if I'm speaking to one person and I'm just going to be doing, speaking into my camera or something like that. I can set it up with my large ring light that's adjustable. In a situation like this, I have 3-point setting, a 3-point lighting setup, where I have one light that's directly behind where the camera is, one to the side on the right, and one to the side on the left. All of them adjustable, so that if I'm too exposed, it's too bright, not bright enough, I can adjust it. Amy says, facing a window or putting a light behind your webcam is also great if you don't have a ring light. Absolutely. And when I've been in hotel rooms, when I've had to do webinars in hotel rooms, that's been what I've done, where you can adjust the lighting, put it behind the webcam, elevate your laptop, or put it on books, boxes. I've used decor that I found inside of hotel rooms before. And I have a friend who's still standing and working with her laptop on boxes, and we're almost like 3 months down the way from working from home for most of us. So
Yeah.
there's a lot that you can do. The only thing I would say about facing a window, and then I'll pause, John, is I would say that's a great idea when you can be sure of that the light will stay the same for a while. It's a clear day, the sun's filtering through, and it's probably going to stay the same. At certain times of the day, there's sunlight that comes through here that blasts as if it were an atomic bomb that went off. And so if that time of day hits while I'm on the camera, it's just going to, you're going to feel like you're seeing some nightmare vision of God. And that is not what I want you to think when you're watching a presentation with me. So yeah, you just want to be careful about being able to plan for what that light is going to look like that's coming from your window.
And then as far as the comment that we got about, well, should we send the webcam? That's going to be a little bit pricey because you would want to send a good one, and they're going to be at least $50, which is about the amount of both a ring light and a headset. So you're going to have to pick what you want to send. But if you can afford it, that would be great. Maybe what you do is do a technical review as part of your checklist, and then you make a decision based on that person. One other comment I have on audio is that I think it's a really cool look where there's the radio mic, and a lot of times there's the tripod that comes out with the radio. And I don't know, Odessa, if you have that that link, but in the slide notes, there's a link of a microphone that's pretty reasonable that I've always wanted to get. I haven't gotten yet. Oh, there it is. Thank you. So anyway, we'll make sure we get you the ring light one and the microphone one. And that's a good look, particularly if they're going to be doing podcasts and they're going to be doing more than one. It's a really good look, and it is a great sound.
Let me show you on that subject.
Oh, you got one. Okay.
This is what I use. This is what I use for my desktop that you can't see that's behind here. But what's really great is, you can get your mic flags to go with it that has your branding on it. This is my ATR 2100. And it is, you're right, you're going to get a much better sound. Right now, you're hearing me through my Blue Yeti, and it's a good sound. This one's better, and it's actually a little cheaper.
Really? Well, the link we are sending is a Yeti, so
yeah.
you have a Blue Yeti that's right below you. We can't.
I have
see
a
it.
Blue Yeti. Yeah, I'll pick it up. I want to adjust. So
wait, let's see it. Down. Okay. Oh.
Yes. I have to be careful so I don't bump the mic.
And I have to stop laughing because my image comes on the camera. Okay, we can go to the next slide, Odessa. Okay, being creative about your content. Now, this is where the conference meetings team needs to get together with the education team and start collaborating on new ways of building online content. So I really want you to think creatively and build some on-demand content that can be used in an informal setting or a formal setting. I like to promote the use of check-on learnings, but you can do those. You don't have to call them check-on learnings, but you can do little quizzes or drag and drops in the middle of somebody's session. Even pre-recorded and live sessions, you can have some kind of widget that you build. There's all kinds of good tools now. The H5P tools that are free are really, tremendous. You can gamify them and, have puzzles. So what I'm saying is brainstorm between those of you in the learning space that, are more used to building on demand, or might have a vendor that builds an articulate storyline, and start combining those to make your virtual events a little richer with certain activities. Odessa, I don't know if you want to live dangerously here, but I'd love to go to short sims. Let's see, maybe I could do it here if I have it. I'm going to just jump to the short sims person. How many familiar with short sims out there? Clark Aldridge. Nobody knows Clark Aldridge. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen here, and I'm just going to talk a little bit about this. So this is an exercise that is basically a branching story, but you can make really short ones that maybe take 3 minutes to go through. And Dessa, I don't know if you want to share shortsims.com, because I'm disabled as far as me sharing. Okay, fine. People can look at it yourselves here, but it's a great thing. And what Clark Aldridge has done is he's done a COVID-19 back to work short sims, and he's giving it away at no cost. So you can contact Clark, and if you like the short sim on COVID-19 back to work. But the idea is that it's a branching story, and what the attendee's doing is basically picking a path. And if you demonstrate to experts, so let's say, being creative here, but let's say you sent out this checklist to your experts. Why not consider sending out a list of types of pre-activities that could be developed if they're interested? In other words, you offer to help them enhance their presentation through some on-demand pieces that could, you could send it out in advance. I mean, look at it as if it's a video that you produce in advance. Maybe it's even part of a promo video for the conference itself, and then you use that in some content. So Kiki, in your experience, have you seen any more, elaborate presentation of, developing pre-developed content that enhances a presentation?
Yes. Oh my goodness. Okay, so I love everything that you were talking about with having the interaction, and figuring out ways that you can incorporate things like trivia, that you can play games with people in a good collaborative way, so that people are having fun and they're not just sitting. I think that one of the biggest challenges that we have right now with this type of the virtual events is that so many people are just sitting, and the content is sort of the same kind of 30 minutes to 1 hour, either panel or one presenter. Let me tell you somebody who's really done a very clever job of incorporating different elements into his speaking, and it shows. You definitely don't have to do all of it, but it shows where things are headed, I think. His name is Brian Fanzo. And Brian Fanzo is a keynote speaker. He makes 100% of his money as a keynote speaker. But one of the things that he's done that I think is really impressive is he's looked at ways to incorporate Prezi into an Ecamm into his presentations, so that when he's presenting, he has multiple camera angles. He is able to do an overlay with his information from his slides while he's talking, so that one of the common problems we have is you'll have the big screen that's the slides, and then a little tiny box with the person. This makes it so that you have it could be like the two of us with key points that are over here in the corner that people can see, that's in an overlay on the edge of the content. And he's done all the bells and whistles. I mean, it's a little bit crazy, because it's like no one would do this besides somebody who gets paid 100% of the time from keynote speaking. But I have to say, if you want some ideas on ways to do things differently, he's really been exploring them so that he can provide value and continue to get paid. And I think he's showing the value that he has. And I'm actually, I don't actually personally know him. However, I will say that
Kiki,
Yeah.
Can you spell his name for everybody?
Yes, Brian Fanzo. And I'll type it over here too.
Oh, we sent somebody found it already. Prezi, fun.
Yes,
Great.
yes.
Thank you so much.
So
Yeah.
you should check that out because this is an idea. I am in the process of learning more about how to incorporate that and up my game.
Mhm.
But I think that if you are working with content creators, subject matter experts, speakers on a regular basis, you might get some ideas or send some of that their way so that they can begin to up their games too, because we all have to be thinking about ways to better engage. And
Right.
the second point I want to make here is that when we're thinking about our virtual meetings, I really think that whether you're a speaker, a host, someone who's just organizing it or any in any way, you want to be thinking about how are people engaging with each other, because the one thing that the in-person has is these built-in moments where you have the hallway conversations and you have the meeting somebody while you're both getting coffee and at the Starbucks at the same hotel, and that kind of stuff. And because we don't have that, we have to have better ways in order to help all of you, for instance, engage with each other. So one thing we were talking about earlier is how weird is it that Zoom webinar doesn't offer breakout rooms when, of course, you would want to have breakout rooms. We want you to be able to talk to each other. Why isn't that available? And that's something that that you're going to be seeing more and more of as technology providers are hearing this from the people, the facilitators, and the people who are now using their tools in ways that they never did before at greater numbers. And
Right.
so, yeah.
I think too, again, what we want to do when we get to be creative with content is to bring marketing in. So we've got marketing, meetings, and education together, making our virtual events stronger. I mean, you've got the idea of, doing a short sim, doing a professional looking video, doing really good, questions or gamification in people's sessions or between them or in a networking opportunity or a trivia event. Bring in some vendors that know storyline, articulate storyline to build a little sequence. Use, H5P techniques to really enhance and we all know marketing has those connections with some of the professionals because they're typically doing really polished events. So I think we need to come together and make our virtual events stronger by building more complex and creative content.
Yeah. We had a question. What is H5P?
Oh, that's a good one. Adessa, can you send the link to that? It's essentially an free authoring tool online that allows you to build really cool stuff, and it works within the browser. So we'll send out that link to the H5P site. So let's just get together here. We'll do a little crowdsourcing here. If you could just start typing in different ideas that you may have come into your mind now about different types of content we should be building. I like this icebreaker is a cool tool.
Yeah.
That's really good. There's H5P up there. It's .org. So if you could, let's share here. Type in what other types of content, and the video doesn't necessarily have to be like super polished. I mean, the iPhone video today or the Android video is just incredible what people can do with it. So there's always that, asking your members to do a short video, a short piece. The Zoom, the other thing about is there's creative ways of using Zoom. I've seen people promote their virtual conferences by having different Zoom clips of members and staff talking about the upcoming conference. And those are really easy to produce because you just send them a link. 5 minutes later, you've got a little testimonial or a promotional comment. Have you done that, Kiki, where you're recording Zooms and then use them?
Oh yeah. And I have some favorite tools that I use. One of my favorite tools is called Headliner. And Headliner, don't go to headliner.com. It's headliner. I think it's app. Um, So Headliner is a really awesome tool that allows you to put together short clips of things, and you can use multiple video clips of your own. You can find royalty-free stock footage that you can incorporate into it, and you can also do an overlay of your own video or your own audio. And so and incorporate all of your branding elements into it, and it's for a really low fee. So I'm a big huge fan of Headliner, and I use it all the time because those small video clips you can use everywhere. You can use them on your social and any of your social media channels, and they also, you can create them in different formats. So whether it's for Instagram or Facebook or for YouTube, your website, it's like simplifies editing.
Great, great. So as we're wrapping up here today, we first of all, we appreciate all of your input. You've done a great job. Odessa, if you want to just take us through the next slide, we'll probably have to skip this encouraging chat line, but I think today is a really good example of how we've done it. One of the things in the Experts Halo that I've got coming out in August is I talk a lot about how to be more mindful in managing experts. And I think that's been a theme today in terms of what are some things that we can do to get our experts more involved. And I've got a really, I'm going to review in 1 minute here, which is a good thing because I get way too geeky when I talk about this. But my model, which is to really to be aware of the, you know, the politics or the fact that we're dealing with experts who are rock stars in their field. So we need to be careful of that and demonstrate that you're a rock star in your field, which might be in structural design. It might be in planning meetings, but you want to establish yourself as a rock star so as well, and then respect the fact that they're a rock star. And with all projects, providing structure and really good project management is, you know, will earn you the respect of your members. And that means, you know, schedules and deadlines, and you know, people like to be reminded of deadlines, especially experts, as we all know. The other thing is developing a shared language, and what I mean by that is, if you're a learning designer and you're into really improving the learning event or the exercise and moving it above, you know, comprehension and knowledge to more applied learning, you know, you might want to, you know, have a handout on Bloom's taxonomy and talk about the verbs of learning objectives. And then also, you know, it's really good if you can work it in, and most of us can't because we don't have time or budget, and that's user testing. So some of our bigger events, if there was a way to do some kind of pilot testing of it, it would definitely improve that event. So I'd like to encourage the idea of improving performance through user testing. Last but not least, we need to come up with ways to increase the momentum of a project. I don't know if you have any tips of that. I'm sure, Kiki, you get your experts pretty excited about working with you.
I mean, I hope so. I hope so. Yeah, I think that you sort of set the pace. So I think that if from the beginning, when you must make sure that you are in alignment on your expectations, because if you have given a false sense of this is going to be a someday sort of thing, there's no rush, and then all of a sudden you need a lot to be done, it's going to be extremely hard to get them going. On the other hand, if you have people who say, look, my time is now, I need to get this done now or else it's never going to happen, you need to know that too. And so you set the pace, let them know what this engagement is going to be like from the beginning, and then do it, follow through, and be the person that does what they say that they're going to do. Because I think, you know, as far as momentum or any of this, really we're a society built on relationships. Our businesses are built on relationships. So we always need to be thinking about how are we cultivating that trust, and that's something we work out all the time. So
One of the things,
yeah.
one of the things, Kiki, that I like to push, and just don't do enough of, and that's get a good graphic artist and push good art at your experts, because that'll get them excited when they see design. And I know you believe in that because you're
Yes.
your place there is well designed with that little red square behind you, matching your matching your outfit. So no,
Yeah.
but it is important. I think you can spike momentum with great graphics.
Make
I
them
want to.
look good. Yeah. If they
Yeah,
know they're going to look good because they're working with you, they're going to love you. Yes.
right. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming. Thank you, Kiki, for being a part of this webinar today. And Kiki already covered that you're gonna, if what can go wrong will go wrong. So we got everything in. Yeah, it's Murphy's Law, right? So be sure to practice and work with your experts. Any final questions, we'll deal with them. I know that we will send you this recorded link so you can share it if you'd like. Right, Odessa?
Yes, that's correct.
Great. Thank you. Any last words, Kiki?
No, just thanks everyone for attending. And thank you, John, for inviting me to be a part of this. I really, really appreciate it. And thank you, Odessa, out there in the ether, making sure that we're looking good on here. I appreciate all of that.
Yeah, thank you so much and have a great day.